Okay, hi everyone and welcome to this week's tutorial video. And this week we're looking at the story of the Tower of Babel, which is found in Genesis chapter 11 verses 1 to 9. And we're really looking at the fact that this tower was built with pride, and that was the problem. So it's not so much what they did, but why they did it. So we're really this week thinking about our motives and the fact that pride can often be a motive for our actions. And if we're going to be followers of Jesus, then the opposite of that is what we need, which is humility. And so we're comparing this passage in Genesis 11 to what Paul says about Jesus in Philippians 2 verses 5 to 11. And in that passage, Paul says, your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus. And then he goes on to describe the attitude that Jesus had. So there's a real contrast here. So looking at the questions for this week, the first question says, human effort apart from God will ultimately fail. And do you agree with that statement, or is that, statement sometimes not true? And I've got some passages there for you to look at. Can we achieve things in our own right without God that are of eternal value? So that's a question I'd like you to think about firstly. The second question says, what's wrong with making a name for ourselves? One of their motives was, let's make a name for ourselves by building this huge tower. And I'd like you to compare that with what Jesus did when he left his Father's home in heaven, his seat at the right hand of the Father, and he came down to earth and he humbled himself. And his attitude in doing that. There's a real contrast there. The third question says that their plan in building the tower was to not be scattered over the whole earth. Now, why did that plan anger God? What was the problem with that? And why is it that we often think we know better than God what is best for our lives? And what's important in putting our agenda aside and choosing God's agenda in our lives. It was John the Baptist who said, I must decrease and he, Jesus, must increase. How does that look? And what's the contrast there between the obedience of Jesus and the defiance of the people who were building the tower? And then fourthly, why can't we reach up to God through our own efforts? They built a tower that they wanted to reach to heaven. They wanted to reach God through their own efforts. Why does the Bible, in particular the New Testament, say that that's not possible? And what do we need to do in order to have a relationship with God? What role does Jesus play in that? And what role does humility, obedience, and God's grace have to play in our lives? This is a really interesting passage. It really sort of captures human nature, and I hope that you guys get a lot out of studying this. So have a great study.